This is about building relationships, not just revenue. Money, they say, oh, the money is the root of all evil. They say, it says that in the Bible. It's like, no, the root of all evil is the love of money. All of it, at the end of the day, we have to ask what money is. And money is a story.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Landscaper's Guide. Today I'm excited to have a repeat guest. Somebody I've collaborated with on some webinars and podcasts is Joshua Gillow. And I'm excited to interview Joshua about his new book, The Core 10 Sales Playbook, Tools for Outdoor Living, Landscape, and Hardscape Contractors. And Joshua, this is a great book. It's also a great audio book for folks listening to prepare for this. I got the book, I read some of it, I got busy, and then I bought it on Audible, and that was cool to just drive around and listen to the book as well. So first, just wanted to congratulate you on writing a great sales book. I know how much effort goes into writing a book, and this is cool, man. So congratulations.
Thank you, Jack. It was a pleasure to write, and 30 years of broken bones and bruises and all that stuff in order to build build what's in the book. So I appreciate you having me on here, and I'm excited to talk.
Well, for folks listening who maybe haven't met you before, tell us a little bit about your background. You grew up. I learned partly in this. Your mom had a garden center, kind of, right? So tell us a little bit about your family story and then your background running your landscape company that led you to what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So yeah, I started around 5 years old where I was born and raised out in the countryside between cornfields, not a whole lot of people around. And my mother decided she wanted to start a garden center because she had extra plants that she was raising, put a little sign out at the road and started getting people coming in. And I saw her starting to build a business. My father was, at that time he was in the meat department at the local grocery store. Anyway, that started to grow. More people kept coming in. They kept buying more plants. My father eventually, moved over to working with her full time, and they started building a company. I was young at the time, probably it was probably about 7, 8, 9, 10 years old in that range. So I got to grow up in a family business where we worked 7 days a week, didn't get paid for it, and that was life, right? You just never questioned it; it just was what it was. So fast forward then to about 18 years old, people started coming in the garden center and asking, "Hey, can your sons build stuff?" My brother, he's about 18 months younger than me. He said,
Mm.
Can your sons build stuff? We have things we need done around the house." And I still never forget when the first customer said that they would pay us $1,000 a day, which included materials, Jack, but
Okay.
$1,000 a day to come out and do stuff around their house. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like I'm counting on my fingers. Like I'm used to working 7 days a week. So I'm like 7 days. I'm like, we're rich. Like it's amazing because we had no money. Right. So started that. That's what started my first landscaping company. It was called Timber Rock. It was my brother, my father, and I. And we did all kinds of odd jobs around the house and eventually got into patios and seating walls and kind of like a lot of guys do. They started off with the proverbial pickup truck and wheelbarrow and worked our way into doing, four and then five and eventually, dare I say, six-figure projects back in the early 2000s. And it was like, wow, a lot of stuff come at us quick. Um, I did that for 15 years with my brother and father, and eventually my brother and I had a falling out. So I started my current design manage practice master plan. Um, Again 15 years ago, and it's been an incredible journey. And so much of what I share in the book is all of the challenges and the trials and the poor decisions and all of that, and the good ones too, but things that I learned along the way, because no one kind of grabbed my hand and taught me how to communicate. I was never that guy, so I wanted to help the industry with that part of my gifting that has been so instrumental in my shift in my life. So that's the shorten of it.
Well, it's an awesome story, and it's one of the things I love about the landscape industry is so many people start when they're, in your case, 5 or 6, or really young, and partly just through grit and hard work and perseverance, they get to a certain level of success, and then they realize that although they're busy, they're not really making money, and so you shared you're pretty vulnerable and candid and raw in the book. It's really, I appreciate that about it because um people see you have your podcast, you've got your cool background for people watching. It's really cool. You got to check out the Sales Made Simple podcast, and they, without hearing those stories, might think, oh, Joshua just has been slaying it at this level forever. He must be. But
Yeah.
one of the sentences that stood out in the book was something that you said, and it was you need to grow from being a craftsman to a professional.
Mhm.
And what's the difference? And tell me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Craftsman, I know when I first started out in this industry eons ago, almost 30 years now, I just wanted to build cool stuff, dude. Like, I was so excited, full of energy, full of curiosity on the farm. We did everything, right? If you needed an engine changed in a truck, you went and bought the engine at a junkyard. You hope like heck it ran, and you put it in the truck. You spent a week doing that, busting your knuckles, getting all the tools, borrowing stuff, and making it work. And, I'm just used to doing things with my hand. I learn best with my hands. So for me, getting out into helping people and having them pay us to do it, which was a fascinating idea. I love to build stuff. So that's the craftsman side of things, right? I think a lot of our brothers and sisters in the industry, they get into building outdoor living spaces, landscaping, hardscaping, all that kind of stuff because they love to build cool stuff with their hands, right? They just love it, like taking an idea and bringing it to life with their bare hands. I don't know. There was nothing that was more exciting for me as when I was growing up in the male to do that. To take just words and turn them into spaces that families come together and take pictures in and all that. That just lit me up and still lights me up to today. Right. But what I learned along my journey is that being a good craftsman, being good with your hands as an owner will get you so far. And eventually you're either going to stay there, which there's nothing wrong with that, or you're gonna become more in a professional stance. And what I mean by that is not giving up your roots and not, going against who you are and who God made you to be. But it's more about how do I become more so I can give more, right? So in order to become more, learning the professional side is the communication, the sales side, the systems processes, understanding how marketing works, like all of those kind of bigger things that we don't really want to play with because we just want to build stuff. But all those things are necessary if we want to build stuff, if we want now to empower teams to build stuff. So it's not just about us anymore. It becomes kind of like when you have kids, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, it's not just about you and your wife anymore. It's all of a sudden now you have these little people that you're pouring into and that they're asking of you more than you want to give some days, right? So to build that team dynamic, you have to take a step from being the one doing it with your hands to finding a way to find joy and excitement in being the ones that manage and lead the ones that are doing the stuff. So that's the transition. And in that, what we see a lot of people coming into our courses is you see about $1 million is how far you can get, roughly, depending on inflation, of course, but about $1 million in revenue before you start to see the fracture in not having any systems in the business. You can get to about 1 million without systems. And after that, they're like, well, I need a system I don't have enough time in a day anymore to go out to 15 leads a week and only get 4, right? It's like all that wasted time. Like, well, I don't know where this time is going. I don't have enough time anymore. And that's about $1 million is where systems become very pivotal and transferring beyond that, or hold you right where you are if you're not willing to open up and learn how to do that. So, the craftsman is the guy doing the stuff. And if that is your calling, listeners, if that's like your calling, you're like, look, all I want to do is build stuff, then you need to find people that are willing to do the professional stuff around it. Right. So that you can be, doing what you do best. But finding the right roles, getting in the right seats, all that
Uh,
is important to crack that $1 million line.
well, and so for the folks listening, I'm thinking of the book The E-Myth Revisited because that book talks about the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. And I think a lot of us start as a technician of some kind. We learn a trade or a skill, and then we strike out on our own. And for a period, you're freelancing or whatever you want to call it. You're a solo person, and then you start growing and you start trying to hire people, and then maybe you become. I called myself an accidental manager. I didn't really think about what I was doing, and I made a lot of mistakes hiring employees and not planning the money part, and then realizing that my bookkeeper actually couldn't help me at all with that. They're just like, "Hey, look, my job is just to make sure your books are accurate." I'm like, "But I'm losing money." And they're like, "Yeah, that's your problem. That's not what I do." And I'm like, "Oh, I need to learn." I need to learn a lot of other things. But for the folks listening, maybe they love the craftsman role, the technician role. Do you think would they be better off as an employee somewhere? Or a subcontractor? Or
I mean, it's possible, sure. I mean, really, I believe that all of us are endowed with specific special gifts from, as you know, from God, and it's our goal, it's our objective to figure out what they are, and then once we find out what they are, once we discover them, to master them and share them,
Mhm.
right? So, not everybody is has an entrepreneurial spirit or heart, or nor do they want to. Not everybody loves to be a technician. Not everybody likes to be the manager. Like, for me, I found that over time that visionary long-term vision is something that I have as a gift. Like, I can see forward, I can see things that other people don't
Mhm.
see into the future. And what I've also found is when building teams, I know that about myself. So others that I bring onto the team, they are strong in the areas that I'm weak, and finding what those, but knowing that about yourself so that you can kind of insulate yourself with others around that support you where you're not your strongest is really the bigger piece. So could you be, one or the other? For sure, you could be. Could you go work for somebody? You could take your gifts and go there too. It depends on what you're looking for. What often happens, Jack, and I'm sure you see this too, is where you have men and women out there, or brothers and sisters, who are like, I'm tired of working for somebody. I can do this myself. I can then make my own hours. I can make as much money as I want, and I can do this in my way, the way I want it to be done, right? So they start their own business. There's not a whole, a lot of hoops you got to jump through in America to start a business, which is why it's so amazing here, right? But at the same time, what they don't realize is they give up one job, which is, 40, 50 hours a week, guaranteed paycheck, possibly benefits depending, right? All for an absolute hope. Right? Because at the end of the day, what often happens, and this happened to me for many years, is that I own my job. And I was my I was my own worst enemy. I was working 5 days, then 7 days a week just to pick up the details, working 80 plus hours a week, all to find out at the end I barely had enough money, and I'm like, "If I just stayed working for that other company, it'd be so much easier." I started out washing dishes for extra money after I started the company. I just had a lot of things going on because the company wasn't putting a lot of cash out, even at $1,000 a day. I thought it was a lot of money until I realized that, half of that went out in materials. Plus I had my equipment and all this stuff. So I didn't know any of those things when I started.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's understanding those parts and understanding where you're best suited, but so much of this is about time preservation and being intentful and investing time, not just spending it places.
Well, yeah, I'm with you on that, and then there's learning about taxes, and being taxed as an employee is different from being taxed when you're a sole proprietor or you own the company. And even if you make 60 grand as an employee versus making 60 grand as a sole proprietor, you're going to pay so much more in tax on that 60 as the owner, that you actually make less and you may have spent more time doing it. So there's a lot of lessons in business, but I wanted to focus on some of the core 10 sales, and I wanted to encourage people listening. Some of you might already have $1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 20 million. I interviewed somebody with a $30 million landscape company. I believe, and I read the book. There's always something to learn from a sales book, is what I found, is there's always something. And one of the things that I really liked that was a core theme in here, and you had a little formula for it. And this is from the core number 3: stop selling features, start selling outcomes. And I wanted to, you know, hear from you a bit on that, because many people will say, well, Jack, it's all about price. All my customers care about is price. And this book overcomes that mindset really in a lot of ways. But one of the tactics that you gave people that I think we could talk about a little bit, it was a little formula. Do you remember the formula? Can you
So that equation, yeah.
Yeah, so tell us about that, so that equation. I think this is something that people listening right now in spring 2026 could take and use, like, literally today. If you're driving to a job site, or you're going to go meet a customer, talk to us about that.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for that. And the funny part is, I added that in the book. It's something that I learned a while ago and been integrating. So now, when I speak in front of crowds and we talk about that equation, and they immediately say that's so easy to implement, and they do, and like, holy crap! Like, we're selling, our closing rate just went up because of the way we communicate, and that's
Mhm.
that's the key. That's the key to it all. It's not about what you're doing is wrong. It's there's ways to enhance it to get a better result, right? So that equation, the fundamental of it, is our industry loves to sell features. right? I'm gonna build you a fire pit, a patio, and a seating wall, right? You're like, all right, great. It's what the customer asked for. That's what you give them in your proposal. So
Mhm.
in your proposal, after the customer asks you for that, you're like, all right, cool. I'm gonna give you that fire pit, that seating wall, and that patio. And then they ask three contractors because they already know what they want, right? So they're coming to you with features, and then all three contractors say, yeah, no problem. I'll get you a quote for the patio, the fire pit, and the seating wall. So when the homeowner's sitting there looking at three proposals sitting in front of them, and all of them say those three things on them, and each have different prices, what do you think the customer's gonna do when all of them look the same? Like, what are they gonna do? You think they're gonna pick the highest price because they like to spend extra money, or do you think they're gonna pick the most logical choice, which is what?
Mhm.
The lowest price, right? You've given them no other choice. A homeowner sits there and says, "Why would I spend more for the same thing?" Even though we know, Jack, that they're not the same. Every one of those companies has a different level of craftsmanship. They have a different level of integrity. Like all of that is different. But to the homeowner, they've given them no discernible difference. So the equation says you take the feature and you add the so that, and then you populate that area in your proposal with the emotional benefit they're going to get from that. Now, what this takes is during your conversation, your discovery process, with your customer when you're having conversations early and they're talking to you either on the phone or you're at the job site and you're saying, "Hey, we want to put in a new patio, a new seating wall, and a new fire pit." And you're like, "Okay, so tell me more about that." And you're like, "Well, right now our backyard is a bit drab. It's an old concrete slab that's just falling apart and we don't really go out there much. And I'd really love to have a patio that was easy maintenance, low maintenance, that I could have family gatherings on. And I wish I had a fire pit that we could roast s'mores on, and I wish we had a seating wall that was comfortable right next to that so we wouldn't have to bring chairs out anymore." So the professional hardscape, landscaper, outdoor living contractor is taking down notes of what they're saying. Not just fire pit, seating
Mhm.
wall, and patio. They're catching those descriptive words. And what we'll do with those descriptive words, we're mining them, right? What we're going to do, we've got to capture their exact word. Don't correct them. They chose out of millions of choices of words. They chose that fragment of word or those word groupings to
Yeah.
describe what they're looking for. So when you're on your proposal or even in your conversations, you're like, "All right, Mrs. Jones, look here. We
Mhm.
have a patio so that you can have, low maintenance, comfortable space for your family to gather. And then we put in this fire pit so that you guys can roast s'mores on that Saturday night, like you told me a couple weeks ago. And you know what? We're going to put in that seating wall so that you don't have to bring chairs out anymore and you always have seating right there next to the fire pit."
Mhm.
Did I hear you right when we talked last? And by that time, their faces are lit up. They're like, "Oh my goodness, he finally listened to me. This is amazing." It's the same thing. It's the same patio, the same seating wall, and the same fire pit. But if you take the feature, add so that, and capture their exact frame of words that they're looking to describe how it would make that
Mhm.
space better or the emotional driver they're after, it changes everything. You use that in your design presentations. You use that when you're laying out your proposals, and then when you set your proposal next to the other three, guess which one they're looking at when you have a higher price. Guess which one they're thinking like, "Wait a minute, this one actually solves my emotional problem." Because ladies and gentlemen listening, the 80% of the problems they're bringing to you aren't physical problems, they're emotional problems. They can't do certain things they want to do. So 80% of this is emotional, 20% is logical. So if we know that to be true, which it is, now it's a matter of how are we showing up in the way that we are addressing and working with our customers, communicating with them to make sure that we're hitting those parts where they can understand we are the best fit because we listen best. And these solutions that we have are going to give you exactly that and more. That's how you go to premium from being in a constant street fight in a price battle.
I really like that. And one of the things that I like about it is it's I think sometimes people think, "Oh, well, I'm not gonna read a sales book because I don't wanna learn some slimy sales tactic to, like, swindle people." You're just talking about really listening to people and repeating back to them what they want in the way that they wanna hear it, and I really like it. In fact, I'm thinking about a sale that I'm making this week, Joshua, and I'm I'm collaborating with somebody on hiring me to speak at one of their events. And one of the things that happened in the conversation that I literally have some of my notes on paper that were on my desk from that meeting, and this person mentioned learning objectives 3 times, and he used the word implement 3 times. And he's like, "We wanna have learning objectives that our audience can implement right away." And so I did exactly what you're talking about. I'm like, so what I'm hearing you say is you want to make sure that each talk has learning objectives so your audience can implement. And he's like, yes, that's exactly. And so and then I wanted to share a tactic that I'm using. I'm using AI quite a bit. So right after the call, I actually take notes on paper and then voice stuff. I'm currently using Claude for my AI, and I'm like, "Hey, in the proposal," I usually call it key takeaways. I'm like, "Change the key takeaways sections to learning objectives the audience will implement." Right? So it's literally I'm rewriting my own thing. It's basically I'm not nothing sneaky here. I'm just communicating in the way that my client wants to be communicated with. It's the golden rule.
It is. And you're doing something that most contractors, including myself in the beginning, struggle with, which is listening. Because we think we're going out to put on a
Yeah.
performance, right? We think we gotta go out, knock on a door, heart starts pounding, it's like you kick the door and you're like, "Let's go!" Right? It's like some kind of, like, big event, and it's not.
Yeah.
That's why the first core is to talk less and close more, because this is not
Uh,
about you.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I really like that. That is literally the first core is talk less, close more. And, I was coaching one of my salespeople on my team, and I said, "Hey," we were doing a role play, and I said, "Hey, in that role play, what percentage was you talking versus me talking?" And he's like, "Oh man, it was entirely me talking." And I'm like, "All right, let's do it again. And how can you ask me questions to get me to talk?" And I target 70%, 70% the other person talking, 30% me talking. Tell me, why is this a challenge for craftsmen? Right? So why is this a challenge for somebody who's and for folks listening who have been doing hardscaping, they've been doing construction, installation. I mean, I just partly want to acknowledge the gift that you're talking about is so many of our listeners have incredible knowledge of horticulture, construction, drainage, all design. They can see things. How is that also a challenge for them in selling?
Yeah, because I know when I first started, I had this idea, this inkling that I had to prove my worth. Right? That I had to
Mhm.
prove my worth through just being really smart and sounding really smart. I grew up in the garden center. I could name any of the plants in that garden center, which are just about everything that could grow in our area. I could name them in Latin and English. Like I knew these things in and out. They were like my friends. Like seriously, there was just so
Yeah.
many, and this is what we did every day. So when I got out to meet a customer, I'd be talking about a plant, and I would use the Latin terms and all this because I wanted to sound really smart. I thought that sounding smart was going to equal the sale.
Uh-huh.
And unfortunately, that's not how it works. There is some level of intelligence that goes into this, of course, like a level of skill. And anybody that's at the level of craftsmanship that most of our industry at shouldn't have a problem with it. But we have to go in understanding what our role is. Is it to put on a performance and to wow them with your dazzling knowledge, or is it about understanding what they truly need, want, and desire?
Uh-huh.
Because
I
it's important to know and for them to feel like you can listen and understand. That is so much more important than for them to think you already know the answer because you don't. 90% of what contractors do is assumption. They assume things. That customer
Mhm.
needs this, customer needs that. This is what we're going to do. This is when we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And they assume things. And the customer has a completely different set of expectations than what you do. And that's where there's so many collisions on the job site, why contractors lose money, why they lose opportunity for referrals, why projects go south is because it's a misalignment of expectations. And it all comes from, not all, mostly comes from assumptions and just trying to fill in the blank quickly because you're going 1,000 miles a minute. So really, it's because we're excited. Why do contractors do that? It's because they're proud of how smart they are and how much time they put in and how much they've mastered this subject that they want to share it. But customers don't care so much about that. What they care
Yeah.
about is that you truly understand and are willing to listen to what they want. Because their primary question is, what's in it for me?
Mhm.
That's a human primary question. So your customer's like, why choose Jack over Joshua? What's in it for me? Do they listen better? Are they cheaper? Are they down the road?
Yeah.
Because price is a consideration, but for most, it's not the only consideration. And contractors think it is the only one. They can completely show up late, do half-ass, proposals, not do things on time. And they're like, doesn't matter because it's only about price. No, price is a consideration. Whether you have $1 or $1 trillion, it's a consideration. So we need to
Yeah.
set ourselves up to be the ones that listen best because the best sales detective is the one that closed the most projects.
I'm with you on that. just a personal story. Right after this call, I'm picking up my mom at the airport, which is really cool. And on the way, I'm dropping off a check at a plumber, at a plumber's office, and they just installed a boiler for me. And I interviewed 2 plumbers, partly just because my experience has been that a lot of people never even send you a proposal, or they don't there was a third company in the running that just never showed up. And we hired the more expensive plumber. Pretty similar, like, we're getting a boiler, right? They were different boilers, and I did look into them and everything, but a lot of it came down to the feeling that we had with the one company was they were more professional. They listened to us. Um, they didn't make us feel dumb about what we didn't know about boilers and all the different options. And they also, another thing, they had way more Google reviews. So it kinda came down to, I'm like, "All right, I've already Googled both of you." That's how I found them, because it was just, I don't know, all the referrals I got were like, "Oh, yeah, that person moved, so and so." One of the old plumbers I hired went out of business, so we went to Google, and, it's different from selling design build construction, of course, but it's similar in that we arrived at 2 proposals, one was more, and the feeling of, "Okay, this company listened to us." They also planned a phase for something later that we wanted, a water filter, and they listened to us.
Yeah. Yep.
So
It's yeah, so much of this isn't about, telling people about your value. That's what a lot of sales guys in this industry do. They feel like they gotta go out and tell them about how great they are. Even if you don't saying that, it's still like, "Hey, we're the best. We have the this, we have the
yeah.
that. We." They swear they're French, right? It's this constant, like the "we" part. But client basically just wants, "Does this person understand me? Do they really know what I'm after here?" To your point with the boiler, they knew after our conversation with you because they asked good questions that you wanted to put in that water filtration system as well. So let's plan for that. The other guy might be like, "Hey, we got the best product. We'll give you the best price. We can be out here the fastest." But to a lot of customers, that's not enough. It's not enough to be the lowest price. They want something more. And
Right.
discernible people that have discernment in that, they're going to be like, Jack, there are people out there that all they care about is the low price. And they'll be willing to do a half assed project that'll fall apart in 2 years just so they win the low price war. And that's great. But those aren't our customers.
Well, and I don't wanna screw around with this again. I've had to replace so many things at my house
Yeah.
that I want quality. I want it done right the first time, and I want a company that I can I think is gonna be around.
Yeah, that's true.
And if I need to pay a little more for them to be around, that's just me. So, Um, I wanted to there's 10 core steps. We can't possibly give it away because people need to buy the book or audiobook. But one of the things that I want to talk about that, was a challenge for me, and I think it's a challenge for salespeople in general. One is identifying as a salesperson is like a dirty word for a lot of people. But you talked about, humble beginnings, working 7 days a week. You share, not making a lot of money. Talk to me about some of your personal growth in mindset, and rather than just you, I mean, like, what do you see with your clients? You do sales coaching. You have do you still have that in-person event in Pennsylvania?
We do. We just haven't run it this year, but yeah, we do in person. I travel the country speaking to groups and all that. It's all within our industry. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess you work with a lot of people who are working on improving their sales. What are some of the maybe mindset challenges that people have around money? I that you've either personally overcome or that you find people struggling with?
Yeah, I mean it's a deep subject we can have a couple of podcasts on, but across the top of it, so much of how we manage money and what stories we have around money in our own head come out and how we communicate
Mhm.
when we're salespeople. Right at the end of the day, I use the word closing a lot in my conversations, and for some that puts the hairs up in the back of their neck because in their mind, closing is like closing a door. We're done. It's over. No more. None of this kind of stuff. And I have a different definition of closing. For me, closing is closing the gap between where a customer is,
Mm,
uncertainty, and where they want to be, which is happy and certain. We close the gap. We get that blessing, that privilege to close that gap. So that's what closing is. And how much you show up in that is going to determine how effective you're going to be at helping those customers. Because if we can't close that gap, if we can't take them from uncertainty to certainty, uncertainty meaning I don't know what to do back here, I don't know who to hire, I don't know what's going to cost, I don't know what's going to look like, all these things,
Mhm.
over to we solved all that for you. Sign here and we're ready to go. Like that's our job. So if we don't prioritize that as contractors and think through and designers and think through like how can we help make that experience for our customers as seamless as possible, listen to the very best, and that will help us elevate our standing in our market because right now with the world the way it is, there's a 60-40 split, right? 40% of the people in the United States can still afford things they could always afford and they're not really, it doesn't matter what the economy does, they're not really affected that much. They think about it, again, another consideration, maybe it's a timing thing, but they're still gonna do what they're gonna do, and they want what they want, like your boiler. Like, if I go to buy a vehicle, I'm at a age in my life where I want what I want, right? And there's many people out there that are the same way, and if we're trying to market not even market, but communicate to somebody who you know, they're living paycheck to paycheck. It's a very different explanation about what money is than somebody who has lots of it and is not worried about that part. So we have to be careful with who we're talking to, right? If you're talking to the other 60% who money is very, very emotional for them and they don't have a lot of it and they're constantly trying to cut corners and cut quarters to make things work, then it's a very different conversation. So we got to know who we're pointing at, right? But so all of this comes back to what story do you have around money? Honestly, like what is money at the end of the day? For some, it's power. For some, it's security and safety. For some, it's food. For some, it's freedom. I mean, there's so many different definitions of it. Until we really understand what that means for us, money. They say, "Oh, money is the root of all evil." They say it says that in the Bible. It's like, no. The root of all evil is the love of money as its own currency. The money itself. It's not what it can do. I believe that we become more so we can give more. Right? And that can be given in money, that can be given in time. They're all currencies at the end of the day. But if we think back and think, all right, how did I think of money a certain way. My wife thinks of it different way. My kids think of it different ways. My friends think of it different ways. Just think, listeners, about how many people around you and how they all see money differently. Some will spend quickly without thinking. Others won't spend a dollar. They feel guilty and shame around spending money. All of that is because of internal stories that you have inside. Like it or not, they're stories that were gifted to you, most likely when you were young or what you saw in your environment. If you grew up in a really hard environment where you didn't have a lot of money, I didn't have a lot of money. It can go one of two ways. Either you hold it all in, many ways, but one of two primary ways. You hold it all in, you don't want to give any away, or you give it all away, right? Because there's always more coming. Like it's so there's two, but all that comes down to the story you have inside around what money is. So to answer that question, Jack, around the psychology of money, it's all of it. At the end of the day, we have to ask what money is, and money is a story. Its value is based on the stories that go on in your mind. I should have this. It's the should haves and the could haves, right? I should have this. I'm supposed to have this. I'm 47. I should have the house. I should have the this. I should have the that. And all of those are stories in your head. So the first step in anything is just start to become aware of them. That's the first step in all of this, just become aware of it. Like, hey, I'm human. This is part of the human experience. This is how God wired us. So now let's start becoming more aware and get really curious. Like, okay, why do I think that? Why when I go to buy a bag of chips, I don't feel bad, but when I go to buy a car, I feel really guilty or whatever, right? Or why when I go to buy a new backpack because I want to go hiking, I feel guilty, but I go to buy a pair of shoes and it doesn't bother me at all. It's all money. It's all these things come back to internal, subconscious, and or conscious stories you have inside. So until we get to that point and start getting a sense of what money is to you, um, it's really a crapshoot depending on each person.
Hearing you talk about that, some of the things that I used to tell myself was, oh, I'm not good at math or I'm not good with money. And at that time, I had a lot of debt. And then I started reading books about it. I read the book Profit First. I realized I hadn't really put a lot of effort into it. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I started reading and listening to sales podcasts and sales books. And um, one of the sentences from Profit First was saving is sexy. And it was just interesting. He talks about I don't know if you've read that book, but I'm like, I've never heard anyone talk about saving being sexy. And I'm like, and it was funny. It was funny. And I'm like, yeah, saving is sexy. Okay, I'm going to start saving a little money. And then I did. And then I started investing money and I kind of flipped the script on it. And that then helped me talk about money with people, with clients, and then I started making money. So it's a funny thing, money.
Yep. Change your story, change your life. That's what it is. So if you want to change, and change can be hard for some because it requires you to go in and change the wiring inside of your own
Well,
mind and your own heart.
I
So
I
it's
think I
yeah,
think part of what I was, part of what I see sometimes is people, they love customer service, or they feel like they're serving clients, but then they also have this negative idea about being paid well to do that.
yeah.
And I think that your book gets into it a little bit, but I see it as an important part of growing your business, is that they're not mutually exclusive. You can make a lot of money and serve a lot of people, and then you could donate money.
Exactly right.
You could volunteer. You can do so much. Um, what what's maybe one of the core steps that you see people struggle with the most?
Oh goodness. The most I would say is expectations. It's the last core, right? Setting expectations. Um, it's so important from the very first phone call through the final shaking of hands, or whatever your final step is in your process. Setting expectations is key to everything, because you can have a much smoother running process if the client knows what's coming next and agrees to that, right? So like, say you're doing your initial phone call, and you somebody, either you or somebody's taking that initial phone call, or that contact form comes in, but your first touch with a customer that's human. Um, and you start setting expectations like, yeah, no problem. Jack will be out on Tuesday at 2 o'clock to take a look for you. And you guys will figure it out from there. All right. Customer's like, cool. Jack's coming out 2 o'clock Tuesday. That's going to be amazing. Sounds good. But that person has never set any expectations except for a time and the fact you're going to show up. So when you get there and you're thinking like, well, yeah, I'm going to do what I always do. I get to the site, I walk around, I give them some ideas, and I'm going to go back and put together a design or proposal, whatever it might be. And like, you have all that planned, but the customer may be thinking, we don't know. They might be thinking you're going to give them a price right there. And deep down, they're disappointed because they didn't get a price on site and you had no way of ever doing that. There was never an expectation set, or that the design was going to be free, or that you're going to charge for it, or that it's going to take 2 weeks to get that back, or the fact that, um, you're going to be running late because you usually do. And 2 o'clock is probably the best case scenario possible. And then a customer sitting there waiting as you're breaking trust by being late. And then, like, there's all of these expectations that have never been said, and that there should be both decision makers there, depending on the size of the project, and that we see the best value that way. And like, all the way down through, there's always expectations that we would want. We think that they should, again, assumption, right? 90% of the time, that's where we mess up.
Yeah.
Assumption. We just think they're supposed to know that because we do this all the time. The customer should just know that's how this works. It takes 2 weeks to get a proposal. It takes a month to get a design, whatever it might be, whatever your time frames are. It's springtime. We're busy. You can't even get to you until August or September, right? It's like all of these things are things that they're supposed to know. How could they possibly know that, Jack? How could they know that?
Mm.
Right? So if we don't set those expectations from the very beginning about what those things look like, when that first phone call is taken and you're having a conversation, you're building rapport. We call that the starter phase, right? You got starters and you got closers. So you got openers, closers. It's a starting point, right? So we're the openers in this conversation. They're not there to talk about budget and all those kind of things. The opener, that person in the office is taking those calls. It's about building connection, building rapport, building a connection, setting them up to win, right? Setting not just the client up to win, but whoever's going to be the closer going out to that site for them to win too. And if you already know what the closer is going to do, that's why systems and processes are so important, specifically in communication. Because if you, as the opener, know exactly what the closer is going to do next, you can set them up for success. It's when your front desk takes the call and they say, yeah, no problem, we're going to send Jack out 2 o'clock on Tuesday. And then the closer gets there and there's no framework of anything that's going to happen there, what to expect, what they're going to leave with, none of that stuff. That they're basically, without saying anything, by omission, they're basically not setting anybody up for success. They're just dropping them into a black hole and just going to be like, I don't know if there's going to be two decision makers there. I kind of know what they want. I really don't know at all though. Let's let Jack figure that out when he goes out on the Tuesday, right? So there's no queuing up. It's like that opener. It's so important
Mhm.
for that one to set the tone of everything that's going to come next.
Yeah.
That can be in a 5 or 10 minute conversation. And then once they've earned the right to your time, you hear how I said the language, earn the right to your time. Then, however you engage next, whether it's another discovery call, which is what we recommend, to be able to have a little bit more time, you, the person who's going to be closing with them, to have a conversation before you ever go out to them. so that you can make sure that everybody's on the right page because your openers don't go deep into budget, go into all those deeper pieces because they're not specialists in that. They can't be specialists in everything. They just be specialists in building connection, building relationships. And then when they build that relationship, the people are happy to see Jack. They can't wait for you to come out or get on that call first with them and then go out. So it one cues the other for success, and the homeowner wins the entire process. That's where contractors miss it because Isabel in the office, she cues everybody up. Sounds good. You go out on Tuesday, and then the closers go out, and they're like, I don't know, they didn't show up. I don't even know what they want. I saw on the sheet they're looking for a patio and a seating wall. Okay, great. That's what I sold them. I don't know why they didn't call me back. Well, because you never build a connection. This is about building relationships, not just revenue.
I'm with you on that. There's a lot of overlap between my book, The Tree of Good Fortune. This book is clearly it's mainly focused on sales. Part of what I write in my book and what I try and help my clients do is to build that call into the process, because so often exactly what you're sharing happens. And I remember I was hosting a mastermind at NALP for their Breakfast of Champions on design build, and this guy told me that he had spent 4 hours, and you told a 4-hour story in here, right, of driving out for a 4-hour no,
Yeah.
and the office scheduled a call for him, or a meeting rather, and he just went out, and the prospect had $2,000 budget for what started at 20,000. And I think this expectations, a lot of this book, thinking of how this serves the client. Some people might think, oh, well, I don't want to have a qualification call because they're going to feel like I'm selling to them. No, you're serving them by figuring out, what do you need? Hey, is there anyone else who lives on this property that might be involved in this project?
You know what the most amazing thing is, Jack? It's a shifting for our industry. My main objective in writing this book is to announce to the world my mission in our industry, specifically landscapers, hardscapers, and outdoor living professionals. That's who I want to talk to. Our people, the people I grew up with, the people that I know best, that I've been in this long enough with. Right. So it's this idea that if you take the call. Somebody in your office takes the call, they queue you up and you go out without much of a conversation. It's just like, all right, go out Tuesday, 2 o'clock, and you go out and do that. That'll work. Industry average for closing rate, that people actually sign up for things, give you money after you spent your time, is about 25 to 30%. I've seen it as low as 8. I've seen it as high as 90. The average is about 25 to 30%. So what that means is that hey, I got a call in the office. I schedule you. Basically, I have a scheduler in the office. I schedule the person to go out. That'll work about 1 in 3 times. And that's good if you have nothing but time to piss away. But I don't know about you, Jack, but in a business, I don't have time to piss
Well,
away. I've got
I
family. I've
yeah,
got a marriage to work with.
right.
So it's so important. It's so important to understand that time is precious. And if you just stop for 1 second as the industry and realize that the discovery process, that person coming in, they scheduled the discovery call. If you actually have a call in the comfort of your office before you ever burn a dollar's worth of gas now, which doesn't take you very far, and you take 10, 15, 20 minutes as the closer to have that conversation with them, that your closing rates go from the 25, 30% north of 50%.
Yeah,
North of 50%. My goal is to get everybody above 75% closing rate in our industry so that we can get our time back and the freedom that we started our businesses to have. We're going to get it back by having better conversations up front and preserving our time.
I'm with you on that. We people need you have to, right? Your family needs you at home. For me, the shift for me was when I had kids. And I was, at this time, I was literally driving all around the Denver Front Range area, meeting with people, and I was working 60, 80 hours a week. And I remember I
Me
had
too.
a business coach who before I had kids said, "Hey, how much do you work now?" And I'm like, 80 hours a week. And he's like, "What are you going to do when you have a kid?" I'm like, "I'm going to work 80 hours a week." He's like, "You won't be able to. You're going to be exhausted." He like warned me of like really basic dude stuff. And I'm like, "No, I'll be fine. I'm young. It's good." And then, oh man, I was exhausted and I got angry. I'm like, "No, I'm not going to drive around like this anymore." And that's when I finally started qualifying. And well, Joshua, it's been a real pleasure having you here. And tell us, where can we get your book? Where can we connect with you? Where can we learn about your podcast?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on here, Jack. I love sharing this stuff. It has absolutely changed my life and has changed the lives of so many around the country now with the blessing of being able to share this. But the best place to go if you're listening, you're like, I'm curious about what's in this book. You can go to Audible, look up the Core 10 Sales Playbook is the only one there like it. You can grab a copy there. You can go to Amazon and you can grab a copy there, hardcover, paperback. You can grab Kindle. So and Audible's there too. So anything you want, any way you will like to listen. I know I was a huge listener when I first started reading, if you will, reading air quotes, right? I love the content, but I didn't have the focus or the time to sit around. So I would just get back then it was cassettes, right? CDs and cassettes. You remember those days, Jack, don't you?
For sure.
Yeah, and so you
Well,
can get everything on Amazon.
so it's funny you mentioned cassettes because I started my first sales job. I did door to door sales as a milkman at the dairy farm. And I drove these 2-ton box trucks and they had a cassette player. And so I had I bought a Dolly Parton cassette tape at the thrift store next to the dairy and a bunch of other stuff. And then I bought Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I had like a iPod with the cable that you plug into the headphone jack that has anyways, yeah, for sure. Get the audiobook because hey, if you're listening to this and you're driving around, next time you go and lose a sale on the way home, download Joshua's book on Audible. Listen to it on the way home. Right?
We talk a lot about the pre-qualification process. We give you the 5 pillars of all of that and how you can start integrating. My goal with this book was to be the fundamental, foundational, um, book for our industry that no matter where you are, whether you're doing well north of 1,000,000 or whether you're struggling to get to the $1,000,000 line, that you can utilize principles that are in here. These are timeless principles. These aren't principles that just work for 2026 and this is how you gotta, be manipulative and all that. This is core, integrity-based ways of being a better listener and to be able to serve your customers at a higher level, i.e., be able to charge premium as well, all the way through the entire process. So I wanted this to be our starting point because I don't know that it's ever been written like this for our exact industry that struggles and focuses on an exact such a specified skill set of these larger projects and all the craziness that we deal with the weather and all that stuff. So
For sure.
um, yeah,
Yeah, it's a great audiobook and it has scripts and role plays, things that you could literally listen to and go use
yeah.
today. So check it out. I'll put links in the show notes. And Joshua Gillow, thanks again for coming on the Landscaper's Guide.
Thank you, Jack, for having me.